Hi everybody, welcome to another Chats with Chaudhry. I hope you're safe and well and had a great start to 2023. Today I'm delighted to be continuing my Reflections and Forecast 2022-2023 interview series. And I'm joined by Cherwell Laboratories, Andrew Whittard, who is the Managing Director for Cherwell Laboratories. So we're going to find out a bit more about Cherwell Laboratories, but also his views on the market in the last 12 months and his predictions for this year as well. So Andy, first of all, Happy New Year. How are you?
Happy New Year to you as well. Yeah, very well. Thank you very much. You?
I'm very well, thank you. It's lovely to meet you. Before we start talking about your thoughts on last year, for people not familiar with Cherwell Laboratories, could you give me a quick overview of the business?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So Cherwell is a SME manufacturer of prepared microbiological media and supplier of clean room microbiology solutions to the pharmaceutical sector. So for us, that, as I say, is about prepared media, environmental monitoring products, and we look to supply domestically in the UK market, but also internationally. The business was formed in 1971, so we're into our 52nd year,
Right,
which is nice to be able to report. And we're based in the lovely market town of Bicester in Oxfordshire.
I know it well, yeah, just off the M40, if I remember.
Indeed.
Right,
yes,
fantastic.
most people know it for the international
for the
shopping village here, yes.
Exactly.
Which is globally well known.
Definitely. Oh, well, that's fantastic. Well, look, given that you've been in the market for such a long time, this will be really interesting, I think. So first question, though, which I ask all my interviews is, how would you describe the last 12 months in one word?
I thought about this and sort of several options came to mind. I landed on unpredictable.
All right, good one.
Because, you know, who could have predicted Russia invading Ukraine and the atrocities from that? That came completely left field. Who could have predicted the merry-go-round in UK politics around, what was it, August, September, October time, wasn't it? And then who could have predicted the crash of the financial markets as a result of Trussonomics, as it became known? The final one was, I know they were kind of favourites, but I don't think it was predicted. But for the England Lionesses to win the Euros that year was also slightly unpredictable, I guess, wasn't it? England finally succeeded in a major sporting event. So so unpredictable was the word that I landed on.
All right. And in terms of that, then, in terms of the unpredictability, how has that impacted your business, and what were some of the key achievements that you had as a business in the last 12 months?
Yeah. So, with unpredictability becomes instability, of course, which all businesses hate. Businesses like nice, stable environment. You can predict things a bit more soundly. And I think for us, like any business through a period of time like that, having key focus on our sort of purpose, our vision, our objectives is always really fundamental in being successful. Right. So we kind of just sort of doubled down on that, really, to make sure we maintained focus in the area of the market in which we operate. I'm pleased to say that we delivered good growth last year, so that's really important for us as a business and helping fund our future plans and all that sort of thing. We also recognised that, and this actually came out of a survey we did of our customers last year, some of the things they're looking to us to do to help support them in their challenges. And one of those was about sharing expertise and knowledge. So we launched our Delivering Knowledge platform last year, which is a video-based platform, which is on our website. And that's about bringing industry voices, experts, and basically sharing knowledge, sharing expertise and experience. It's early days. We've got work to do to expand it, but we think that's a key development that we were pleased to launch last year.
Brilliant. And in terms of your portfolio, which you have got a very broad portfolio of products, haven't you,
yes,
within the business? So have there been sort of any developments in that range at all in the last 12 months?
There's been sort of incremental developments. We've got some things coming as well, which I can't say too much just yet. So I guess for 23, look out for those things coming. But one of the strengths of our business has always been our ability to kind of tailor some of our solutions to client needs.
Right.
It's not a case of one product fits all. So we continue to evolve that through the business. And as I say, we've got a couple of things in the pipeline which we're sort of excited to start sharing this year, basically.
All right, great. Well, we'll maybe touch upon them a little bit when we start talking about 2023. And looking back at the last 12 months from an industry perspective, I mean, what challenges do you think your particular sector within pharma has faced, and what developments stood out within that space?
So I guess pharma has had to deal with and face a lot of the same issues that everybody else has had to deal with. And they've just manifested themselves in slightly different ways. Undoubtedly, there's still fallout from the COVID pandemic, which we're all wrestling with. And dare I say, even from the dreaded Brexit, which, does seem an eternity ago now. And, we've seen those things impact supply chains, undoubtedly in other sectors like the electronic sector. The issues in Taiwan and supply of microchips has been a big factor, isn't it? Car industry as well. So I think supply chain issues generally have impacted our sector. We've certainly seen challenges in our supply chain that have meant that things are on longer lead time or just not available, actually. And that's a real issue for planning and obviously maintaining delivery of product to clients. As well as all that, the whole rising cost piece has been a big factor. We're wrestling with that. I'm sure our sector is wrestling with it as well. Specific to our sector, I guess 2022, the big challenge was, will it, won't it arrive, Annex One? It was almost becoming a bit of a non-event, really. Obviously, it did eventually arrive in August. And I think everybody was kind of waiting to see what was going to happen. Would it arrive? Would there be last minute changes? We've obviously now, as we go into this year and looking forward, need to be thinking about what ultimately will the impacts will be of that. And I think the other thing, possibly not so much in our sector, but we're starting to see, and potentially, could be again one of those things that we need to look forward at, is being the growing use of AI technology. And I just wonder how that's going to play out, I must admit. But yeah, I think the pharmaceutical manufacturing sector probably has faced pretty much the same challenges everybody else has done because of the instability and unpredictability of 22.
Yeah, sure. Well, can I ask you then specifically, I mean, in terms of supply chain that you mentioned, for example, as you said quite rightly, and I've spoken to a lot of people about that, and they've all said supply chain has been such a big issue. As a business, from your perspective, how have you been able to manage those challenges and also manage your customers' expectations as well because of those challenges?
Yeah. I think it's two things really. One is, how can you build some resilience into your own business? So, some of those things are about, how much stock you hold of raw materials and such like.
Right.
I think the other thing is just around agility. So as a business, how agile can you be to respond to when component A is no longer available? We've got to switch to component B. What's involved in making that change? As I'm sure the pharmaceutical industry is heavily regulated and heavily risk averse, and therefore every change has to be validated to a fairly high degree. So change is something which the industry doesn't really like, in all fairness. So agility, I think, is a key thing, and something which I think we're not too bad at is being agile and having to respond to those things, and being customer focused all the time. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, for any business, it's about meeting your customers' expectations. Sure. So setting right expectation and then following through, of course, are the keys to that. And keeping that on the straight and narrow.
And do you think that period when we had that sort of lockdown period with COVID and business was heavily affected, helped you as an MD in terms of getting the business ready to be more agile? Because a lot of companies had to pivot, to use that term, which was used very frequently during the last few years, their businesses around to deal with the challenges that COVID and lockdown brought. to
Yes,
both the sector, but also in terms of making sure that they could supply what was vital equipment at a very
absolutely.
difficult time. So do you think that because of that, you were better prepared this year for things that might be unpredictable because of how
Yeah.
you'd managed the business and adapted the business because of COVID?
So I think some of that plays back to the point I made about focus. And a key message that we put out in our business during the COVID pandemic was that we're a small cog in a vital supply chain, because at the end of our supply chain is a patient ultimately.
Sure. Yeah.
And whilst the humble petri dish might seem very distant from that, it is a cog in the journey that gets a treatment into a patient. So helping our team really understand that was vital. So during the COVID pandemic, we stayed fully operational. We had some people work from home, but as a manufacturing business, most people can't, of course. And I think that focus means that you stay looking at what's important rather than worrying about what's not important. I think as far as being agile, I think we've got more we can do in that space. We're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination. But I think by keeping your focus on what's important, it kind of almost drives you to be agile in a degree, because you know what you've got to do, rather than getting distracted by what you haven't got to do, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, fair point. And one other question I'm going to ask you is about Annex One. We're going to talk about Annex One in a bit more detail when we talk about 2023. But initially, when Annex One came out in August, was it what you expected? And I suppose that's my first question. The second question is, do you think it will have a huge impact going forward? And we'll talk about the impact going forward in 2023 a bit later on in this interview. But just from your initial thoughts when you saw it, first of all.
So obviously the published version was pretty much as the draft version that had been around for, I don't know, 6 months or more.
Right.
There were some minor typographical changes in it, I think, nothing of any note. So yeah, it pretty much what I think was as we were expecting it to be. Sure. I think because it had been in the pipeline for so long, it was a little bit of an anticlimax. It eventually arrived. Almost, it's here now. Okay. And the impact, I think probably the jury's out on the detail of that yet, and I know we'll come on to that, but I don't feel there's been any impact at this point in time. I know there's a sense that the regulators were already starting to impose, might not be the right word, but to kind of play the new annex in their discussions with manufacturers before it was released anyway. So it was almost a soft launch, I think.
All right. Well, fair point. And my final question related to 2022 is, and some people like to answer, some people don't. So feel free if you don't want to answer it. Is that, are there any areas that you think the industry could have improved on in the last 12 months?
I'm not sure this is perhaps specific to the last 12 months, but perhaps just generally, and I don't mean this to sound critical of our industry, but I wonder if one of the things that our sector is probably struggling with and grappling with is how they tackle the green agenda. How they set net carbon neutral, net zero, whatever terminology you want to use in that, how they set their aspirations and ambitions for that. And I'm sure there's lots of good stuff already going on. As I say, I don't want to sound as if I'm being critical, but it's a challenge. It's a real challenge, because this sector, like the healthcare sector, relies heavily on disposable single-use products, which come in multi-layer packaging, generally plastic. They use an awful lot of disinfectants to keep their sterile aseptic areas in the condition they need to be. And of course, they run clean rooms 24/7. And I think there's a real challenge. It's a challenge for our business as well, because we run a clean room, and therefore some of those challenges are exactly the same for us. And I wonder if it's a piece that we're struggling to grapple with, about how do we start making significant inroads in that, and for us as a business. It's one that we're really starting to sort of debate and try and work out what we do.
Well, that's again a very good point, and again a theme which comes up regularly when I talk to senior management in different sectors with across pharma and
Mm,
life science. Sustainability is now becoming a key pillar, if you like, of a lot of businesses' values and
yeah,
strategies going forward as well. So that's
yeah,
interesting. Great.
definitely.
Well, look, let's look ahead now to 2023. So I suppose looking at life science, pharma, biopharma in general, so looking at the big picture rather than specifically environmental monitoring, what are your thoughts and predictions for this coming year?
um, I guess, with a backdrop of these sectors don't change overnight. That
Sure.
they're big beasts, and from the point I said earlier about sort of validating change and everything, then things don't change rapidly in our sector, so it tends to be a slow burn, I suppose. And touches on some points we've already talked about dealing with ongoing supply chain challenges, shortage of skilled employees, which I didn't mention earlier, but again, I think that's an area which our industry is struggling with a little bit, to be honest with you, and the UK economy is struggling with, dare I say, because of our decision to leave the EU.
Sure.
And I don't think that's going to improve anytime soon. So I think that's a big challenge. Not so much a prediction, but kind of almost a bit of a thought bubble. Is I still wonder what the lasting positive impacts from the COVID pandemic and the COVID vaccines will be in our sector, specifically around drug development, because we clearly saw that COVID vaccines were accelerated to market, and really quite successfully. You have to say that was a real thumbs up for our industry, our sector, to
Sure.
bring those products to market within 12 months. And I wonder what the lasting legacy of that might be about drug development, about how regulators view that process, about the use of computer modeling and also AI technology in that space. I think there's probably some quite exciting things to come out there. I don't know what they are, but I have a sense that there could be some really great things that perhaps can be brought to market quicker to help improve health generally, basically.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think also you have got patients' expectations changing because of what happened with the
Absolutely, yeah.
vaccines. That
Yeah, very
is
much.
whether they can go back to thinking, yeah, new drugs will take a long time, or can things get turned around as quickly? I mean, obviously, the vaccines are very different. It's a case with the amount of investment put into it
Yeah,
by governments and so on.
yeah.
But still, there is that view as well. Well, let's drill down a bit more then in terms of your specific area of expertise and this segment that you guys work in, which is obviously contamination control. So,
Yeah.
what developments and trends do you expect to see or predict within the contamination control area, and obviously with the new Annex One updates? I mean, I know we talked about the impact now, but how do you see things progressing going forward?
Yeah. I think the first step of all this is, how are the regulators actually going to interpret Annex One and start applying it in the real world?
Yeah.
It's early days for it, and I think we're yet to see how quickly that will come to be. But undoubtedly, it is going to drive some change. So, having said earlier that the pharmaceutical industry changes slowly, this is going to drive change, force some change. For us specifically, one of the key factors is, how is the view on continuous monitoring going to be developed?
Right.
And there's already been some interesting sort of observations about what does continuous mean, and how do you meet the needs of the new annex to deliver continuous monitoring from a microbial point of view. From a particle perspective, of course, it's already happening. So undoubtedly, some of the new technologies in that space are going to probably gain increased interest. And that's an area that we'd like to have some involvement in. But I think there's still going to be a heavy reliance on the traditional agar-based methods, because everybody's experience, history, data, trend is based on agar-based systems. Right. So switching away from that massively presents a big change in your baseline, in your trend lines.
Can I start you for a second? So for those people not familiar with what the agar methods are, would you not mind just of explaining what the traditional methods are that people use? Not
Yeah,
obviously into every minute detail, but just a quick overview.
yeah, just a quick overview. Yeah, sure. So in its simplest terms, environmental monitoring is done by using settle plates. So 90mm petri dishes placed out in a clean room, exposed for 4 hours. Gravity means that particles fall on the plate, and then you incubate and get a reading. The next level up from that is then using something like a sieve sampler, right, where air is drawn over an agar plate, so you force particles onto the agar surface. There's also a slit to agar solution, which does it in a similar way, but through a slit rather than through multiple holes. And then at the top of the tree would be the new technologies which don't use agar, which use some sort of biofluorescence methodology, right, to count viable particles.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sorry, you were saying that obviously people will still be using those traditional methods.
I think so, yes, for many years to come. Well, in some respects, we hope so, but I think they will. I think the other thing is that one of the other changes, which has perhaps almost snuck under the radar a little bit, is the change to the limits for grade A spaces.
Right.
So, which went from an average of less than 1, and it's now 0. So it's an absolute. And having monitoring methods that are capable of detecting down to that level is now even more critical, because now one event with one viable particle, of course, would represent a non-compliance. And for the pharmaceutical industry, dealing with non-compliances or defects is a massive undertaking in having to demonstrate that it's not compromised their product ultimately at the end of the day. So how the industry and the regulators start imposing what they think continuous monitoring means, and how users respond to that, and how they demonstrate that they're able to successfully get results that are robust and reliable, that demonstrate we are maintaining 0 CFU in this space. I mean, having said all that, of course, most pharmaceutical manufacturers, I'm sure, were maintaining zero CFU in their grade A spaces, even though the limit was of an average less than 1. But now it's an absolute. So now there's no wriggle room. There was a tiny bit of wriggle room before, and now there isn't. So yeah, I think that's the number one thing. And undoubtedly, what our users have to do with regards to Annex One is the biggest challenge they face. And again, that came up in this survey that we did last year. That was the number one challenge they saw, unsurprisingly, to be frank honest with you.
And you mentioned continuous monitoring. So you said, what does that, what do they mean by that when they say that? But what's your interpretation of that?
I think there's I guess, in the ideal world, you'd be doing viable monitoring 24/7, wouldn't you? Sure. I think we're quite a way off that yet.
Right.
So I think continuous monitoring means continuously monitoring your process, which means doing it multiple times through a shift, rather than just doing it at the beginning of the shift or at the end of the shift. It means multiple monitoring points through your shift. So it's about we've always sort of likened sampling and monitoring as sampling is kind of a camera snapshot. Yep. Monitoring as a video. We're trying to kind of morph these together and say, well, if we did repeated sampling, then we're getting we're getting closer to the video.
Yeah, sure, exactly, yeah.
And so that's where we're sort of thinking it will be positioned. But as I say, ultimately, it will come down to how the regulators want to interpret that. And there has been debate already around whether a settle plate delivers that, whether an active sample or active monitor delivers that, and that's sort of certainly putting forward some interesting debate around those things.
Right. And you mentioned AI earlier on. We were just talking about developments in the sector. So again, looking at environment monitoring in particular, where do you think AI and machine learning can play a part in improving environmental monitoring?
I suspect initially, and there is some of this starting to happen, is in trending and interpretation of data.
Right.
And obviously one of the things that when you do monitoring in any situation and you have your trend lines, you're looking for root cause analysis for an event or something. And I suspect that kind of AI approach could have some benefit in drilling down to root cause.
Right.
In actual delivery of environmental monitoring, I think that's probably a long way off.
Right.
That's a whole different ballgame, I think. But yeah, I think in analysing data and helping understand events to then prevent reoccurrence, probably that's a space where that type of technology can certainly help.
Brilliant. All right. And again, we touched on it a little bit, but for 2023, what can we expect to see from Cherwell Laboratories? And what, I know you can't tell everybody everything, because they're all going to be top secret, and you don't want to let the rabbit out of the hat. Cat out of the bag, the rabbit out of the hat, whatever way we want to phrase it. But what can we expect to see from you guys as a business this year?
I suppose the first boring part of the answer is kind of continue to do what we're doing, but try and just do it better and better and better. So sure. We're very much focused in the clean room microbiology solutions space. That's kind of our strapline, and that's what we want to be known for doing. We would like to bring some new products to market, some new offers to market for our customers. As I say, we've got a couple of things in the pipeline, right, sure. That are our own things, and a couple of things that we're discussing with some other people. But that will be about supplementing that focused approach. That one of our ambitions is to be kind of the known clean room microbiology solution provider. So that's a key thing. And I think to continue to grow and share knowledge, because again, that was a key thing that our customers said they really wanted from us, because despite having said that, the pharmaceutical industry doesn't necessarily change quickly because of the constraints it has on itself, the world is changing very quickly.
Yeah, it is.
And, how everything else functions and operates is moving at a pace. So keeping up with that and delivering solutions in more viable methods or what have you is part of it. So yeah, it's apart from the new things we've got in the pipeline, I guess it's kind of just keep doing what we're doing. We're just trying to do it better and better and better, basically. We're not going to suddenly diversify into selling computers or something.
No, I mean, one thing though I forgot to ask you was about collaboration, because one thing that we have seen a lot of over the last few years because of the pandemic is a lot more collaboration between organizations, and you touched on it in terms of obviously you want to be perceived as that thought leader and that expert within the clean room environmental monitoring space. And so you're doing all this extra great information that you're sharing on your website to let people know what's going on. So from your perspective, again, do you see there being opportunities? And I'm not asking you to say something which is top secret or anything like that, obviously. Yeah. But as an MD of a company, do you see collaborating between other companies, an area which more and more companies in the industry are going to do, whether it's people who may be perceived as direct competitors, or people who do complementary products, or people who are up or downstream of what they historically have done to offer more solutions to their customers?
I think the simple answer is yes. I think two things really. One is that undoubtedly collaboration in the marketplace for the benefit of customers has to be seen as a positive thing, and we're very open-minded to collaborating with people, and a couple of things that we're looking at are kind of in that space, I suppose.
Right.
I think the second thing is that one of the values in Cherwell is partnership, and something which we place a lot of credence on and value on. And I think that partnership plays not only internally within the business, but externally with customers, externally with suppliers, with our community, stakeholders, those sorts of things. So that ethos in the business of partnership very much means that collaboration is something that we're always keen and open-minded and willing to discuss with people where we see there's some kind of mutual benefit at the end of the day.
Oh, sure. All right, brilliant. Well, finally, as we are at the start of the year, what last thoughts would you like to leave viewers for 2023?
I think the main one I wanted to leave viewers with was that we're an SME business, a small medium enterprise, and our type of business, SMEs, are the engine room of not only the UK economy, but any economy, I think, to be frank honest with you. And I think what's important is that as SMEs, we are encouraged to invest, grow, develop, innovate, all those kind of things. And I think there's probably a little bit of a message there for our government, possibly, to help support that. Off the back of the challenges we've had, and everybody's had, and everybody's probably going to continue to feel some of these challenges this year. The forecasts for this year don't make for particularly rosy reading, but we're very confident that we can continue to grow our business. And I think it's that sense of, despite everything, we're continuing to grow, rather than feeling that because of everything we're not doing anything. And I think that's probably the sense I want to leave as my closing sentence. Really, despite everything that's going on, we're still trying to be successful and deliver on what we want to do, but that requires sound investment, rigor, and doing the right things basically in your business.
Well, that's a fine way to finish, Andy. So on that note, can I wish you, your loved ones, and everyone else at Cherwell Laboratories a fantastic and successful and happy and healthy, very importantly, 2023. It's been lovely to meet you, and it's been great to hear more about Cherwell and also your thoughts about Annex One and environmental monitoring in general. So thank you very much for your time today. It's been lovely to meet you.
You're very welcome, Rizwan. Nice to talk to you.
And viewers, there you go. If you'd like to know more about what Andy said, not just about Cherwell, but about environmental monitoring, and learn more about the website and all this great advice and knowledge they've got about Annex One on their website, the links will be above the video, so you can click on it and you can find out more about Cherwell, and also go to the page giving you advice on Annex One as well. And if you've got any questions for Andy specifically based on what he said today, you can put them in the comments below the video, and I'm sure Andy will be only too happy to answer any questions you've got. So Andy, all I've got to say once again is thank you very much for your time. Happy New Year, and Happy New Year, viewers. I hope you found that useful. As I said, leave any comments or questions below the video, and until next time, as always, stay well and stay safe. Bye-bye.